Record. Done. So we've recorded. Gallery view. I want to just share my screen to get the slides up. Hang on a sec. Share screen. Can you see the slides, Martin? Can you see the slides?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Okay. So let's start. Today we're focusing on research. We're going to look at 3 sources of recent research on L&D. The first one is the most familiar one, which is the Towards Maturity Benchmark Framework. But we're also looking at the Lpi survey data and also the results of a good practice survey. So rather than try to summarize each of these fairly meaty reports, we wouldn't even get through the beginning of the first one. What I've done is, in fact, it's based on Martin's selection for LDN. What we've done is to pick 3 interesting items, 1 from each research report, and we're going to discuss them. So let's move forward. The first one is the Lpi survey. So 3 quotes, 10 minutes a quote, finish at 9:30, and the recording is on, I hope. First one. This is from the Lpi annual survey. Now, I did an interview with Nick Shackleton-Jones on LNTV only a few weeks ago, and Nick was saying there's this massive trajectory now, moving from courses to resources. And I remember a slide that I had 10 years ago, which was the 4 big shifts in e-learning. Number 1 big shift, from courses to resources. So let's have a look at the data. 74% continue to use formal face-to-face courses a lot. Some blended learning, examples of blended learning and self-paced learning, but essentially this pattern is identical to 2014. So we're not seeing big shifts at all. We're seeing a teeny trickle. And given the pressure, given the time pressure, given the unbelievable access to resources that we have now through things like iTunes U, the open course network, the open course movement, and just the way that organizations build and store resources, this does strike me as being slightly depressing. Martin, what do you think?
Yes, I think this is also, this trajectory is, maybe it's not totally reflected by other data. I mean, effectively there is a very slow decline in, like, it's just brought out of State of the Industry survey, focused on massive organizations. So this LPI barometer research is of a couple of hundred people, but it's in depth. It's significant that number has come up. Other surveys seem to be suggesting that there is at least 50% reliance on courses as the mechanism for delivery of learning. And it's stubbornly, it is on a slow decline. But as you just said, 10 years you said that. And there are 2 things going on here. There's this slow decline, and then there are people like Nick Shackleton-Jones who pretty much have accelerated that decline massively in their organization. And I would just throw in something that I thought was quite interesting, actually, which I think also reflects this shift to resources, is that even course providers, I was talking to Pluralsight last week, and just talking, they offer tech training, great platform. They have subject experts who are the trainers, and that you can do courses. But basically, I asked them how people were using that, and they said people are taking the courses, but also loads of people are just subscribing so they can dip in to the bits that they need when they need them. So they're searching and easily accessing that one bit that will just help them fix the thing that they are working on at that moment in time, just like people do all the time, with Google. And you just think, well, actually, that's even the most contemporary platforms now that are using the term course and, are providing courses that are certificated. So, there is still a need or demand for that. But the usage, I think this is the important point, in the workplace context is dipping in, and that's why there's that shift to resources. So it's baffling that there's this stubborn kind of holding on to course thinking, which is just laden with jeopardy for organisations now. It's laden with financial and resource and it seemingly is not what people want. So therefore, its efficacy is really in question.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And my explanation is that there are thousands of organizations who've made the shift and are making it actively. I was just on the phone yesterday to two big European companies, and both of them, this is the major push for them, to get away from a dependence on face-to-face. And it's not just about money, partly it is, but it's much more about velocity, increasing the speed, increasing the transmission of information around the globe, and so on. So you've got big, powerful push where I think I was right. I think 10 years ago that was starting. I think Nick's right. But you've also got the numbers of the small, medium companies who have got, it's very well put by you, courses thinking. Problem, course. Problem, course. And that will take a long time to work its way through. So we're not seeing in these kind of statistics, we're not actually seeing what the top 30% are doing, I don't think. We're seeing what the middle to bottom 40% are doing. I think that is the issue. And with places like Pluralsight, they've suddenly got an entirely new sales model. So they used to go to companies and say, you need to keep all your programmers up to speed by giving them courses. They're now saying, hey, we just throw that at you and let the staff choose what works for them. And sometimes it might be a formal program because they need to get a new language or need to get up to speed on a new direction. But basically, this stuff is there as program support. It will help them in their performance day to day. And 2 years ago, Pluralsight didn't sell it like that at all. So they've suddenly got a kind of not God-given, but they've got a brand new business model for nothing. And that's fantastically helpful to them. They'll make a fortune out of that. Betcha.
I think also it's just a huge challenge to think that individuals in the organisation are creating their own narrative around what needs to be learnt in what order, when and how. Because courses have a narrative. They have a beginning and they have a middle and they have an end. And what we're seeing is that sort of disintermediation of all of that, isn't it? It's the MOOC thing of them, but they're not necessarily starting at the start and finishing at the end. They're just coming in, looking around and taking what they need. And I think this is hugely challenging, saying that you're the expert and you have a need as an organisation for people to be working in certain ways and to know certain things and to be up to speed in certain areas. Now, especially compliance and these kinds of things. And I think I'm also not talking about very highly regulated work, professions, where I think, absolutely, to be a doctor, to be a pilot, to be these kind of very specific roles, you have to train for years. And I think no one would argue that has to stay and that has to be done in that kind of way. But even within that, there is scope for people to start to take what they need when they need. And I think that's just a huge seismic shift from the last 50 years of training.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. Right, we'll move on. So yes, we've done 10 minutes. So the next one is from the Good Practice Report, which is an insight into how managers learn. And they called it the secret life of UK managers. But it's not actually very secret. You know, that this is not going to be an utter revelation to anyone, that 90% of managers, when they've got a problem, turn to their colleagues. What do I do about this? And then 75% and or search the internet, 70% use an external website, but 30% do actually turn to what's available internally in their learning operation. 30%. Basically, 70% manage to solve their own problems using what you would do in the real world. But, you know, when you're at home, you turn to colleagues, you search the internet, you use an external website. No surprise. What is surprising in a way is, to me, that reality hasn't been built upon by L&D colleagues. Instead of competing and trying to drive more and more people to the internal training, what they should be doing is facilitating and helping people find the right colleagues, search the right sites using the right search engines, and maybe curating the external websites that might be useful. So to me, this screams out curation. C-U-R-A-T-I-O-N. Get your act together, because if you don't do that, then the world will move away from you. Martin, Mr. Curation, what do you think?
Well, I think these are in-depth phone interviews with 500 UK managers. So
Yeah.
it represents a really good piece of research upon which I think any L&D professional worth their salt could reasonably use to challenge how things are done around here in their organisation. That's it's important. And I think the thing about this is they didn't ask how you learn, they asked how you deal with unfamiliar challenges. You know,
Yes.
when you need to know something that you don't know the answer to, what
Yes.
do you do?
Yes.
So this is about, I think, actually, it's just really about performance. It's not actually couched in terms of learning. And I think that's quite an important point too. My thing, I'll come to the curation point, but I'll quickly say something which I think people are going to have to contend with, and there's a very good piece by John Seeley Brown, by the Deloitte University Press, have produced this piece on disruption, and he talks about why organisations are hugely challenged by disruption. You know, why they're not actually able to change themselves in the face of, say, market changes. And one of them is this idea that you've just got so much cost sunk in what you previously did. And I think that's a big thing here, because if you're a reasonably large organisation and you have spent a lot of money on courses and internal content that's just sitting there that you create over time, you've got this problem that you're actually going to have to look at that and say, how much of that is actually relevant now in terms of how we operate as an organisation and what the future looks like. And I think that's where curation does come in. But I think there are two things going on. You have to really face up to the fact that some of that is just a sunk cost. To transform how you do learning is about saying 80% of that stuff is no longer relevant, and we should not have that anywhere near anyone. Now that is a massive, that's a hugely political thing to have to contend with, because that could be a lot of resource that you're saying is no longer relevant here. But that might be the sort of thing you have to do. The other thing is that it can really save you in all of this is having a curated approach. So actually you need to go through that stuff, and there will be things in there that will be really, really good and useful. And this is the time to repackage, add the context, create the playlists, really put stuff into what, in front of people in really compelling ways, and also then let them decide, let them vote stuff up, let them comment, let them add their own context. Then you've got this fantastic opportunity to say, it's almost like that sort of personalized Amazon experience that everyone goes on about. So actually someone in your role previously looked at these things when they started. And, it might just be a playlist of 5 bits of content that just say, yeah, do X, Y, and Z, and then we're off and running. And that could be the most useful thing you do. And the good thing with that is you've got the option to just test it out. It could be a part of your onboarding. It could be a part of your management development. It could be, any place where you're doing stuff in what you consider to be a traditional way. Just start, look at everything you've got, look at how you do it, talk to the people you're doing it for, have a deep understanding of their need and how they work, sit with them, have a look at that, and then design it with them and start playing it to them and see what happens.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you. I love that word playlist. So in a way, this points straight back at the first comment about resources, not courses. How easy is it to put together a tick list of 5 things that new managers found very helpful than it is to build a introduction to management level 1, part 1? How the difference in cost, the difference in scale, the difference in applicability, the difference in relevance. So in many ways, seeing the solution as always internal training, as opposed to building playlists, curating what's out there, talking to your customers, talking to the people who need to use this stuff, is a massive, massive burden that organization learning and development is putting on itself for reasons of history rather than reasons of efficacy, as far as I can see.
Yeah, but the thing is, the other thing here is that I would say that actually there is some stuff. You've got a sense of what works and what doesn't. If you're really honest, and you have to say that 90% of what we do just doesn't work, then you've got to deal with that.
Yes.
That somehow that has to be resolved, because you cannot carry on doing that. However, the opportunity to just say, right, you take a curated sort of mindset to this, the opposite of what you just, so we've got to do courses. It's like, actually, I'm going to talk to people and ask them, what could we really do to support them, when they're doing this kind of thing? And then we're going to start doing that. We're going to build success stories. We're going to share that. This is where change comes from. And it's very compelling. And I think it makes it very exciting, that part of it. And I think that's where we've got to start really quite quickly if we're not doing it already.
No, I agree. I completely agree. And to me, this begins to level the playing field between big organizations, small organizations, big budgets, small budgets, big teams, small teams. Because it means that a very small team and a small organization with a very small budget can have a massive impact across the organization. Whereas if you go for the traditional model, you hold your hands up and say, we can't do it, we can't do it. It's too much, too big, too complicated. You agree?
Yeah, I think also we need to be quite mindful of the fact that, everyone in your organization has kind of some skin in the game here.
Yes.
They know stuff. They probably want, if they like their job or they like your organization, they probably want to do a good job. They're probably looking around them to understand how they could do it better. Forward is to look around you. And this is absolutely what L&D must do within your organization and within the market in terms of horizon scanning, understanding how things are changing. But I think you start to look at people just doing some of this stuff individually as well. They're your engine room ultimately. If you can really get a way of curating across the organization, then I think you'd be surprised at what you could achieve. The issue is always going to be usefulness, relevance, timeliness, and how you present a fantastic user experience. It's design. That's what it's about. And if you talk to Nick Shackleton-Jones, that's probably one of the first things he'll tell you is it's about user experience, and that's what we need to understand also in all of this.
Yeah, and user experience is not just about the quality of the materials or the resources. User experience is the whole package. It's how you get access, when you get access, all of that stuff. Okay, let's move on. We're up to time on the next. The last one is in some ways the most depressing one, which is the Towards Maturity Benchmark 2015. 70% of L&D teams, by self-reporting, not by someone coming in and telling them, failing to improve business productivity. Only 2 out of 10 have seen improvements in learning culture, and 4 out of 10 are achieving increased efficiency as a result of their training strategy. Only 4 out of 10 increasing efficiency, only 2 out of 10 improving the learning culture, and only 3 out of 10 improving business productivity. This would seem like a kind of long, drawn-out suicide note. That if you present this data to any chief finance officer, the first thing that person is going to say is, well, thank you very much and goodbye. Turn off the lights on your way out. It is a pretty shocking state of affairs, and we have to do something about it. We have to be, and I guess 2 out of 10 have seen improvements in learning culture. The other 8 don't see that as an issue. 70% of L&D teams fail to improve business productivity because they're not putting any real effort into doing it. 4 out of 10 increased efficiency. The other 6 don't see that as really part of their job. And we're back to the very first issue, which is, let's just give them a course. Oh, we delivered 1,726 courses, a 15% increase on last year. And all of our Kirkpatrick Level 1 results are extremely positive. We've got to get away from that model. I think the single best thing anyone could do is dump Kirkpatrick, get rid of it, and find some alternative criteria for measurement and get some hard measures and look it right in the eyes and stare at it and say, we have to improve business productivity, we have to improve the learning culture, and we have to increase efficiency. Bottom line, no excuses. Yeah?
Yeah, I think to soften the blow, just for 1 minute, is that UK PLC is just is the bottom of the G7 in terms of productivity, and it's been flatlining for years. It's a collective problem. And I think that what we're seeing here is the fact that some of this data we've talked about today represents a traditional legacy way of doing things, right? And yet we've also been exploring data that confirms what we know to be true and what we do ourselves. Everyone can look in the mirror and say, how do I actually find stuff out? I clearly don't go on courses, so we know this stuff to be true. It's just there's this kind of legacy around it being of itself. So you measure learning for the sake of learning, which I think Kirkpatrick has done for decades, hasn't it? It's was the event good? Yes or no?
Yeah.
I mean, I know
how much did you enjoy
he's tried to make it more sophisticated, but at the end of the day, but what we're trying to say is that things are transforming very rapidly, and they have done over the last 20, 30 years. And this slide is really saying that it's been really hard for people in L&D to have an impact in the way that they would like to. And I think you're absolutely right. I think this really is a wake-up call, and it's not a new one. Towards Maturity have been doing this for 13 years, and I think what fascinates me with this data is that this is self-reporting.
Exactly.
This is not someone else's view. This is people that are doing it, and they're saying we are bad at this.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side, of course, is that that report also looks at organisations that are doing a really good job. And so, there are 30% who are doing good things, or they say they are doing good things. And you find when you dig into that, and this isn't the scope of today, I think we're making the point here that things have to change. But when you dig into those 30% of the top performers, you see that they're doing a whole load of things that are very aligned with what we're saying around the resources and really understanding the need of leagues, and being able to have business impact, influencing at a high level, very good at marketing what they do so people understand what they can do, what's on offer, those kinds of things. And I think this is just really frightening for a lot of people, this slide. You just you don't want to look at it and go, yes, that's me, without having a plan of how to change it.
Yes,
I don't think.
No, I think you're right, but I also think it's very, very important, as you said.
Because Don Taylor's been talking about that.
Go on.
Talking about that. I know you've been saying this for years. You said it's 10 years ago you were talking about resources, not costs, and for a number of years, Don Taylor, the chair of the LPI, has been talking about this grid, and in the bottom left quadrant, we're comfortable extinction, and it's and this, you could put these three boxes in bottom quadrant, and just go, that's potentially what is happening, but it's not like we don't have the answers. All of these reports show the way. They show a lot of data on what works. So,
yeah, it's true. What I was going to say, Martin, is that you can't take this out of context. In other words, what I would suggest is that an L&D team that has nothing whatsoever to do with business productivity is probably operating in a company that is incredibly inefficient and doing everything wrong. We've got to look at, you can't say L&D is rubbish within exceptionally brilliant organizations. L&D is rubbish in rubbish organizations. And there are many companies that are grossly inefficient, have no idea how they improve what they're doing, are complacent and lazy, and and stagger on from year to year, just as there are organizations that are excellent. And the interesting research I would like to see, I would say that in an excellent organization, L&D will be excellent. In a mediocre organization, L&D can make a difference, but there's a kind of inertia factor which pulls it back. So it's not just, it's all L&D's fault. It's part of a worrying business culture in the UK particularly that puts up with all of this, that tolerates it, and it shouldn't tolerate it.
Yeah, don't think this discussion is about us having a stick, or anyone having a stick and kind of giving someone a hard time, waving it at them, saying everyone's doing a terrible job. I just don't think. I think there's for people to be reporting in this way about what they're doing. I find there is but what that gives the profession is a real sense of what isn't working, what needs to be done, and also a good sense of what could be done. There are answers. There are people that are doing interesting things. People are very generous in sharing that thinking, as they do in this Towards Maturity report. So yeah, I think it's hard. It's like that the whole thing about the disruption and having to look at what you've done before as a sunk cost that is never to be revisited. How many organisations are bold enough to be able to have that conversation at a top level? I mean, it's just the politics. The people responsible for having done it are still around. Maybe you who's turning around and actually, we've been doing this, and it's we can't do that anymore. I mean, this stuff is incredibly difficult, but there's an enormous prize to be had
there is.
around really transforming the organisation. So I don't know. I'm probably a bit more glass half full on it, in the sense of, there's lots of evidence out there about what is working as well, and I think that there's just a lot of work to be about influence and impact and thinking, and putting this stuff into action.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it's probably on that happy note we should end. What seems to me that these three pieces of data are pointing towards is both the problem and the solution. That the solution is embedded in the problems, and therefore that makes it much easier to deal with. If we were putting intractable solutions which no one can see a way out of, then it would be deeply depressing. But the evidence is there. We know what people want to do. We need to facilitate that, and we have the tools and we have examples of how that can work. So I agree with you. Glass half full, and I think glass half full is a brilliant point on which to end. Bang on time. So I'm just going to stop the share and stop the record if I can.